The last time the BYU men's basketball program came off an upset of a top 10 ranked opponent, they fell flat on their face in the following game. I believe it'll be different tonight against Kansas State for the Cougars because, simply put, there's a whole lot more on the line.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. I'm Jake Hatch, 14-year credentialed media member at BYU, your resident expert and insiders, your host here on this show. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Coming up on today's show, we're going to preview BYU and Kansas State tonight in the first round of the Big 12 tournament and why I believe BYU will avoid falling flat on their face and getting upset in this first round. Then we'll talk about the all Big 12 awards that were handed out yesterday. I thought BYU got some good accolades, but also some misses, I thought, from the voters when it came to those awards. We'll delve into that, and then we'll finish up today's show on a BYU football front, but in the NFL with two feel-good stories. Tyler Algier and Kairos Tonga getting paid, and if you know anything about their backstory, that is an absolutely awesome thing to see, and we'll talk more about them as today's show progresses. It's all brought to you today by our friends over at FanDuel. FanDuel is giving you a way to turn all of your energy into even bigger potential wins with a college basketball parlay profit boost. Head to FanDuel.com to get started today. All right, so the BYU Cougars and the Kansas State Wildcats square off tonight in the first round of the Big 12 conference tournament. 6 o'clock Central Time there in Kansas City, 5 o'clock for those of you here along the Wasatch Front or in Utah, etc. And it is a big opportunity for BYU to prove to us, I'm speaking of all of us in Cougar Nation, that, yeah, they can get up for big-time opponents, but unlike what happened after Iowa State, they won't fall flat on their face in the aftermath of this win against Texas Tech on Saturday. Simply put, BYU finds themselves now with some juice and some energy and some momentum coming into this game against the Wildcats. And the Wildcats, for lack of a better term, are listless. They have fired Jerome Tang as their head coach, and you should be able to take advantage of that in a matchup of this variety. I don't think Kansas State is in it to make a deep run. They're probably telling themselves that in the locker room, but I think if you get them on a run, they'll fold. And that's where I think things tilt tonight for the BYU Cougars, because they are playing now for seeding. There's an opportunity, very strong opportunity, for BYU to garner as high as a 6th seed in the NCAA tournament. And that's got to be the thought process with this. I think BYU is very capable of winning at least 2 games here in Kansas City, tonight against Kansas State and tomorrow when they would, in theory, match up against West Virginia. But let me reiterate, they got to prove that they can get up for the minnows like a Kansas State as much as they do for the Sharks that are the likes of Texas Tech. They have notched their last 2 wins of the regular season were wins over top 10 opponents, and the interim between those were a bunch of games against middling and lower tier programs that seemingly BYU played down to their level and, quite frankly, got blown out. I'll never forget the debacle in particular of the UCF game, giving up 97 points on your home court to the Knights, etc. They've got to prove that they can go out and play with the same energy, the same drive, the same just overall want to that we saw against Texas Tech, because I'm telling you, that game against the Red Raiders was, in my opinion, the only game all year long. We're talking, there's 31 games in the regular season. That is the only game, in my opinion, that the BYU program, speaking of just across the board, the entirety of the roster played with their hair on fire and played engaged and played with the effort level that we have been seemingly begging for from this team. And they've got to go out there and do that exact same thing against Kansas State. Kansas State's top gun is PJ Haggerty. If there is a better scorer in college basketball, well, they're pretty darn good, because PJ Haggerty's right there among the best of the best. And yes, he is going to look for his in this game. And I do wonder how BYU will go about bottling him up. Will they do what they did against Christian Anderson and say, hey, we're switching 1 through 5. Doesn't matter who's on him, stay on him. And that's whether it's Khadim Mboup or Keba Keita on the switches. And obviously in the guards situation, guys like AJ Dybantsa, Moo Davis, etc. They have got to be able to bottle him up and obviously force the action to other guys from Kansas State. They have other capable scorers on Kansas State's roster, and this is crazily enough. The first round of the Big 12 tournament is a rematch of BYU's first Big 12 conference game of the season. Remember, BYU opened up Big 12 play way back in early January out in Manhattan against this Kansas State Wildcat squad. And it was a pretty decent battle, if you can remember that far back. But I look at this game as a game BYU should win, I think, comfortably. But they've got to show us that same drive, the same motivation to go out there and assure themselves of being in the mix for that 6th seed. And now if you lose this game, then all of a sudden there's a whole situation where you could slide down the seed line once again, maybe end up as a 7, 8, maybe even a 9 seed. It just kind of depends on how this week plays out. But you have it in your control to secure as high as a 6th seed for the BYU men's basketball program, as if I'm speaking to them. And they have to realize that and go out there and seize the opportunity. It's much easier said than done, obviously. And this is a BYU team that we have seen. There have been lulls in terms of their motivation, their ability to defend at a high level. And they need to show, like I said, that same just overall guttiness, the grit that they showed against Texas Tech, even if it is Kansas State. Because you can ill afford right now to fall flat on your face for the 2nd straight time after upsetting a top 10 ranked team. That will tell, I think, all of us out there that, okay, this team, yeah, they can get up for the big dogs, but they don't have the internal fire, the internal want to go out there and play that style of basketball every single game. I'd like to think that they will have learned from what happened against Iowa State in the following games after that, and obviously parlay what happened against Texas Tech into hopefully a dominant showing against Kansas State, but only they can determine what we will be breaking down on tomorrow's show when it comes to this matchup. So very interested to see how BYU goes about it. I would keep the same game plan in play in terms of simplified defense. Switch 1 through 5 and trust that your guys are capable on the perimeter. I think Khadim, Mboup, and Keba Keita showed they are very capable of locking up smaller guards on the perimeter. Because if Christian Anderson can be forced into actions he's not used to by those guys, I don't think that PJ Haggerty is going to be obviously that big of a hassle for this BYU team. And just go out there, play your game, play good, solid defense, fundamental defense, because that's really what it looked like. It was just kind of fundamental, like, hey, we're going to switch 1 through 5, guard your man, and let's go get rebounds. You do your job. I think BYU wins this game, and they win it handily, and they're off to the 2nd round and the West Virginia Mountaineers, which hopefully we're previewing on tomorrow's show. All right, coming up next, though, Big 12 awards are out, and I think AJ Dybantsa, Richie Saunders, and Rob Wright, as you might imagine, were justly rewarded for their efforts this season for the BYU basketball program. But I have got one beef with the selection process. Actually, no, there's 2 I want to get into in particular when it comes to why certain awards were handed out and BYU wasn't involved in said awards. Today's show is brought to you by Robinhood. What if sports were traded like markets? Now you can put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood prediction markets. It's not you against the house. It's you participating in a live market. You can buy or sell your positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in the moments that matter. Robinhood prediction markets changes the game. It's people moving the action. So when the momentum shifts, you can move with it. I always knew the game, but never had a dynamic way to apply that knowledge. Now I can actually take part live in a market powered by people. You're no longer just a spectator. Play by play, you decide. Trade every play with Robinhood, now available across the U.S. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. Futures and cleared swaps trading involves significant risk. It's not appropriate for everybody. Event contracts are offered by Robinhood Derivatives, LLC, a registered futures commission merchant and swap firm. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at TurboTax. Now, it's tax time for a lot of us. That's the old way of doing taxes. Well, simply put, it's a lot. Try to book an appointment. It's not the most convenient, sitting in a waiting room with a stack of papers, emailing back and forth and wondering if they actually get your situation. But this year, you're getting a major upgrade. Intuit TurboTax now has in-person locations nationwide. You meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. And just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar you deserve while you get real-time up notifications as you go about your day doing whatever else you're doing. It's the relief of walking in and meeting a real person and walking out knowing your taxes are being handled right. Head to turbotax.com/local to find a store near you and book your appointment today. Once again, that's turbotax.com/local. Thank you for being here on Locked On Cougars. A reminder for you guys, if you would like to be a part of the Locked On Cougars Everyday Club, I would highly, highly encourage you. Get access to audio ad-free episodes. I know a number of you sometimes complain about the number of ads we run on the show. Well, you want to get rid of that. Join the Locked On Cougars Everyday Club. You also get access to our Discord channel on our Discord server when it comes to Locked On. Have chats with me one-on-one in there, ask questions and the like. And obviously, you can get access to Locked On merch like the hat I'm wearing if you're watching this on YouTube. All that is available to you by going to lockedoncougars.supercast.com. That's lockedoncougars.supercast.com, or click the link in the show notes below. All right. The BYU Cougars and their big three, as we've been calling them all season long, were rewarded for their efforts this season in the postseason Big 12 awards that were handed out yesterday. And obviously, as you might imagine, we saw AJ Dybantsa named Rookie of the Year, or Freshman of the Year, I should say. He was also named to the first team All Big 12 team. He's one of three unanimous selections to the first team. The other unanimous selections included Kingston Flemings, justly deserved there, and JT Toppin, who was the reigning Big 12 Player of the Year. They were the only unanimous selections on the first team. You also saw AJ named to the all freshman team, and that obviously makes sense. On the second team, Richie Saunders, a year after he was a first team All Big 12 honoree and the most improved player in the conference, he gets a second team honor, and that's obviously, I think, very much deserved, especially considering where he was before he got injured, and obviously just his importance to the BYU Cougars. And then, in a bit of a surprise to me, Rob Wright named to the third team of the All Big 12 teams. Now, it's not to gripe about, hey, third team versus second team, but my opinion, Rob Wright is as good as anybody on that second team, in my opinion. Baba Miller, Taman Lipsy, Milan Momchilovic, I'm going to butcher that name until the cows come home, and Darren Peterson. Darren Peterson, when he is on, is as electric a basketball player as there is in college hoops, but are we going to reward a part-time player over a guy like Rob Wright, who's kind of been one of the heart and soul players for the BYU Cougars? So that's one of my gripes with this all Big 12 team. And it's not to say that Rob Wright was snubbed completely, because if he were like honorable mention, then I'd really be upset about it. So being a third team honoree, that's obviously nice to see Rob Wright being rewarded for that. But I think he is as good as anybody on that second team, including his teammate Richie Saunders. And I thought that a guy like Rob Wright would have maybe been a little higher on these awards. Now, obviously, the first team is 10 players deep. The second and third teams are 5 players deep. So there's obviously a little bit of a wiggle room in all of that. But the interesting part to me is Jaden Bradley wins Player of the Year. I thought that JT Toppin probably was trending towards being a two-time All Big 12 Player of the Year, and two-time Big 12 Player of the Year, had he not injured his knee and been out for the season. I'm a bit surprised that Jaden Bradley, over guys like Braxton Burries, Koa Pete, etc., was named the Player of the Year. Now, I think that the Player of the Year goes to the best team in the conference. That goes to Arizona. I'm just mildly surprised that it's Jaden Bradley of anybody on that Arizona team. I'm not saying that Jaden Bradley's not a good player, but I think there are better players on his roster, none other than, I think, Braden Burries. I know that Motias Krivas was also named to the first team All Big 12 team. I'm not saying that he would have been Player of the Year, but I think Braden Burries, in my opinion, was as good as anybody could have hoped for from Arizona. But you know what? Maybe they just found themselves kind of saying, okay, well, who from Arizona? And congratulations to Jaden Bradley. You say, hey, tip of the cap to you, and best of luck as you guys move forward. Because Arizona, they're a unit. They are really, really good. Tommy Lloyd has got himself quite a squad, and obviously very much deserving of the postseason awards that they picked up. The other situation when it comes to BYU in this regard is that there were no other honorable mention players for BYU, no all-defensive team honors for BYU. Now, I think some of you are saying, well, if BYU played some defense, it might have helped. I actually thought that maybe a guy like Richie Saunders would get a nod on that all-defensive team, because he's kind of that glue guy that when BYU's defense seemed to be functioning without him, with him on the court before he got injured, it was him really kind of making things go. But hey, so be it. Obviously, he gets left off there. The all-freshman team has AJ Dybantsa there. I don't think there's an argument there. And then the all-newcomer team, I don't think BYU had anybody that demanded the respect in those regards. But I just feel like a guy like Rob Wright may have gotten snubbed ever so slightly. Now, as I mentioned, third team versus second team, especially when there's 10 guys on the first team. So in theory, you could have gone 4 teams deep if you gone 5, 5, 5, and 5, but so be it. I do think that BYU got what was coming to them in terms of the big three. I just don't think anybody else on BYU's roster, maybe a guy like Keita, but he seemed disengaged for pretty significant stretches of the season, and he was injured at some points and just wasn't the force that could have made him an all defensive type player. So yeah, while I think that other teams got more guys on these awards, let's be real. The big three for BYU were kind of the heart and soul, and it kind of just drove what BYU was this season. So why would you expect anything less than that? Like I said, I just feel like maybe, just maybe, Rob should have been a second team honoree, but and also that Jaden Bradley of all people on Arizona's team. I know that Jaden's got some pretty good stats, and he was a kind of a heart and soul player for Arizona, but I would have gone Braden Burries, and I don't have a vote. So to be very clear, I'm not part of the media core that gets to vote on stuff like this, but you kind of look at it and say, okay, there's opportunities across the board here, but I do think that the Big 12, it's in a good place. They got some very, very strong teams at the top, led by Arizona. I think programs like Kansas, if given the right opportunity with Darren Peterson, if he's playing, very capable of winning at a high level. Iowa State, Texas Tech, like, they got some squads here in the Big 12 conference. And I hope that BYU can make some noise in March, but I think there are some teams here in the Big 12 that are very capable of being, we're talking like Final Four / title contenders, obviously headlined by the likes of the Arizona Wildcats. And I hope they go out there and prove it. I want the Big 12 to put on and essentially stick it to the SEC, the Big 10, the ACC, the Big East, and kind of assert themselves, because yet again, we're seeing the SEC and the Big 10 being rewarded with extra bursts into the big dance, but at least on how the projections kind of sway right now with regards to bracketology. But I hope that the Big 12, the 8, maybe 9 teams that get in, go out there, punch some people in the mouth, and assert yourselves that the Big 12 is without a doubt the deepest and the best basketball conference in the country, because this is when people's opinions form about how good conferences is or they aren't, because not everybody can watch every college basketball game on every given night during the regular season. But when it comes to the NCAA tournament, trust me, there's a whole lot of people checking things out, and they form opinions on pretty small sample sizes. And that's got to be the opportunity for the Big 12, hopefully, to capitalize on and really impress some folks this March. All right, coming up next, we'll finish up today's show. I love feel-good stories. I love guys who essentially bet on themselves. They get rewarded for betting on themselves and obviously are shining at the next level. BYU football has got a handful of those guys, and 2 of them yesterday in the, quote, legal tampering period from the NFL got rewarded with some big-time deals, and we'll talk about them next right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. College basketball is nonstop, big games, tight spreads, momentum swings every single night, from early tip-offs to late-night West Coast shootouts. When it comes to this week, when it comes to conference tournament week, there's always action on the board. Now FanDuel is giving you a way to turn that energy into even bigger potential wins, with a college basketball parlay profit boost. It's a mouthful, but it's a great option for you guys. You can build any type of college hoops parlay you want, rivalry games, ranked matchups, whatever you want in terms of BYU or anybody else. You can make spreads, totals, player props to match how you see the slate playing out. Then you can buy that profit boost and instantly bump up your potential payout with our friends at FanDuel. Go safe, go bold, ride with the Cougars all season long. Ride with the Cougars as you've been riding with them all season long. It's your parlay, your style, now with even more upside behind it. Head to FanDuel.com to get started today. That's FanDuel.com. It's all courtesy, once again, of FanDuel, where you can play your game. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at 5 Hour Energy. It is time now for the 5 Hour Energy flavor draft with 18 different flavors to choose from, including new options like confetti craze, fruity rainbow, or cotton candy, or even birthday cake. There's something for everyone. The board is set, the flavors are ready, and I've got my number 1 pick for the 5 Hour Energy flavor draft. And with the number 1 overall pick, we are going with sour apple. I am a huge fan of sour fruit flavors, and sour apple hits the spot when it comes to 5 Hour Energy. But hey, if you're unlike me and you like other flavors, you have an underdog you like to pick from, I'll just suggest things like berry or Hawaiian Breeze, or even Peach Mango. They have got a bevy of different options for you guys, whether it's sweet in terms of like birthday cake flavors, confetti craze. They've got all kinds of new flavors always coming out. 5-Hour Energy Shots give you a boost with zero sugar, and they have a lot of potential flavor options available to you. Like I said, 18 different ones right now. They're always innovating and adding new ones. Go to 5hourenergy.com, get your latest and most recent options from our friends at 5-Hour Energy. It's 5hourenergy.com, or check them out on Amazon. So the BYU Cougars have a pretty strong core of guys in the NFL right now, obviously, and hoping to add some guys to that this year with the likes of Jack Kelly and Chase Roberts, Tanner Wall. I think of guys like that in terms of their opportunity to contribute to the next level. But I have always enjoyed guys, as much as I love the Kyle Van Noys, the Fred Warners, the Jamal Williams, who are NFL draft picks and obviously have been richly rewarded for their play on the field and have made generational, life-changing type money. I love stories of guys who have overcome adversity and have ultimately made it, and the bet on themselves is the term I love to use, has paid off in spades. And two of them came to fruition yesterday. Now, both of these guys, when they enrolled at BYU, were two-star prospects, and we're going to talk about Tyler Algier and Khyiris Tonga. Now, we'll start off with Algier. We'll go in sequential order of when these deals came in. And Algier was a guy that when he showed up at BYU, remember, he was a two-star prospect, a preferred walk-on from Fontana, California, and was simply looking for an opportunity to play at the collegiate level. He wanted so badly to play that he moved over to linebacker for the BYU football program and actually played against Boise State. And then a year later, just carved up the Boise State Broncos as he's really began to become what he is as a running back. The story of Tyler Algier involves him stocking shelves. I think it was at Walmart in Orem when he was a walk-on trying to just get by. The stories that these guys go through, and I know it's changed now in this NIL world where guys can be rewarded by the collectives and the like, and obviously businesses out there. And the walk-on story is not necessarily as, I guess, the pull yourself up by your bootstraps style as it used to be. But I'm talking, this is a true story about Tyler Algier. He was stocking shelves at Walmart at night, trying just to make it with the BYU football program, moved to linebacker, moved back to running back, back to he just moved position because he just wanted to play ball. And all he did was become one of the best single running backs in BYU football program history. And obviously went into the NFL, has been playing with the Atlanta Falcons, and has been a nice tandem guy with Bijan Robinson. But Bijan, being a first-round pick, if I recall correctly, always kind of got the nod over Tyler, who was a middle-round pick. And he yesterday got, I think, first RB1 money from the Arizona Cardinals, a 2-year, $12.25 million contract. And that's not incredible money. But remember, Tyler Algier, we're not talking that long ago, was stocking shelves at Walmart as a walk-on just trying to get by at BYU. And now he's going to be a multimillionaire. He's already made pretty decent money in the NFL with the Atlanta Falcons, but this is the type of money and opportunity with the Arizona Cardinals for him, in theory, to become a featured number one running back for an NFL team. I hope that Tyler's story continues to be one of surpassing all expectations. He's never fumbled once in his NFL career, and I'm not trying to jinx him here, but I said yesterday on social media when I saw that deal come out, I said, much like he has never fumbled in the NFL, he did not fumble the bag when it came to this opportunity. And I love the story of Tyler Algier, and he will always be a guy I root for because he was super good with the media during his time at BYU, never thought himself above anybody, because I think that when you come in as humble of a entry into the BYU football program as he had, you couldn't not be humble. And now he's made life-changing money. He's made money that I know that his family was trying to help him get by, and they weren't necessarily super wealthy when he was in college. Well, now he's got the money to take care of those around him. And that's a cool story. And I love stories like that. And congratulations, absolutely, goes to Tyler Algier. Now the story about Khyiris Tonga is a similar story. He played at Granger High School. Remember, he was like a tight end. He was kind of an athlete in many respects. And when he came to BYU, he was a 2-star prospect. I ended up beefing up to, I think he was listed at 6'4", like 300 some odd pounds when he played at BYU. And he was the heart and soul of the most effective defenses that Elisa Tuiaki ever coordinated at BYU. And that's a bit of an oxymoron. I understand that. But Kairos was a man amongst boys out there. He played in the 3-man front for BYU, played alongside guys like Zach Daw on that defensive line, and they were very, very effective. They were downright ferocious. But I'm telling you, in the middle of that was Kairos Tonga. And obviously ended up being, I think, a 7th-round pick by the Minnesota Vikings. He's bounced around a little bit, but he is now going to a championship caliber program a year after playing in a Super Bowl. He was part of that upstart New England Patriots team this past year on a 1-year deal, kind of a prove-it deal in many respects, and he more than proved it. I thought Kairos was phenomenal for New England, and like I said, makes that run to the Super Bowl, and now he parlays that into a 3-year deal worth $21 million and change with the Kansas City Chiefs. Andy Reid is hooking up one of his fellow former Cougars and brings in a guy like Kairos Tonga, and him playing alongside some of the really, really good defensive linemen that the Chiefs have. Man, you couldn't think of, I think, a better scenario for a guy like Kairos, and he's got to be licking his chops thinking about the fact that playing alongside some of the guys that this Kansas City Chiefs defense has had. And the Kansas City Chiefs, they're a championship caliber franchise. They obviously missed the playoffs last year, having to retool a little bit, but they're doing it with guys like Kairos Tonga who are coming in and thinking, all right, I played well last year. Let's take it to the next level. Let's help this franchise get back to the Super Bowl ways that the Kansas City Chiefs are accustomed to with Patrick Mahomes and the rest of the guys on that roster. And we'll see how it all goes. And there's obviously another local connection there. Is Alohi Gilman, who played at Orem High School, just signed a 3-year deal coming over from the Baltimore Ravens to join the Kansas City Chiefs. So that's a cool connection. But the story of Kairos Tonga is, like I said, a guy that he's just kind of been looking for opportunities. He goes to the Minnesota Vikings, really didn't make it with Minnesota, kind of breaks out with the Chicago Bears. Did he go to Arizona at one point, I think, for a hot minute? They ends up in New England. And now he gets a pretty nice payday and a 3-year deal. Now, obviously, the 3-year deals are negotiable and you can be cut at any point in that 3 years because we've seen that with the NFL. But it shows that these guys who were 2-star prospects ended up, I think, producing at I would say a 4, in the case of a guy like Tyler Algier, a 5-star level during their time at BYU, have jumped up to the NFL, have found their role, found their niche, and are succeeding at a high level. And I root for guys like this because, like I said, I love the stories of the Kyle Van Noys and the Fred Warners who are expected to do great things. That's awesome because they represent BYU at the highest levels. But even more so, I love guys who come in who are not necessarily thought of as top-tier prospects, and they emerge on the other side and have made themselves into multimillionaires and have become pillars of what BYU can do for guys that want to play at the next level. I love this. And I love the fact that Tyler and Kairos are getting their just rewards. They're getting the money that they absolutely deserve. And I'm rooting them on. And I hope they succeed at a high level. And if you I'll also add this in as well, Chris Brooks, remember him as a transfer portal running back who came to BYU. Well, he has found his niche in the NFL as well and just got a 2-year extension with the Green Bay Packers for his play on the field. He's not necessarily going to be number 1 back material like I think Tyler Algier is, but shows that Chris Brooks also succeeding. Now, he doesn't have the same type of track record with BYU, kind of the 1 year. But these stories, they're why I think we root on guys, even when they leave BYU, because the whole mantra of BYU is enter to learn, go forth to serve. Well, that obviously is in every facet. And in this case, for these guys, it's an opportunity to represent BYU on the biggest stage of football in the National Football League. So you'll always find me rooting for these guys, and I hope that they go out there and kill it. I hope that they make all the money they're capable of making of in their NFL careers here, and that they continue to represent BYU on a very, very high level. All right, that is going to do it for today's edition of the podcast. Absolutely love that you guys are enjoying the content as much as you are. Really appreciate everything you guys do, subscribing, rating, reviewing, sharing with your family and friends. Coming up tomorrow, reaction to whatever happens against Kansas State, hopefully previewing a game against West Virginia in the Big 12 tournament. Obviously, BYU will also be having a spring ball availability later on this afternoon. Speaking of Tuesday, we'll have reaction to that, whatever we learn/observe. We'll get to that. And then, hey, make sure you check out everything we got going on with Locked On. If you're watching on video, we are now going to send you over to the first ever 24/7 National Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. If you're on audio, make your second listen today, Locked On College Basketball. Get up to speed on everything else going on in this crazy week of conference tournaments. Our guys over there, Locked On College Basketball, they are working their tails off to cover the sport when it comes to the month they call Izzo. So as always, please follow the show on social media as well, Locked On Cougars on Facebook, Instagram, or X/Twitter. And as always, come back tomorrow and be an everydayer right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.